Yeah.
It's Tina Fey on the phone saying, hey, I got.
And it's
Oh, Billy, I just sent you a direct message instead of to everyone.
Good morning. We ready to go? Tracy, Tatara, you ready?
Yes.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you all again for being here. We do not need introductions. We all seem to are beginning to know each other well. Tracy, Tatara, this is your show. We're happy to hand this piece off to you and continue to move forward with building a culture of belonging in our community and communities beyond our Illinois borders, our country's borders. It's great to have so many people with us. So thank you again for joining us.
Yes. Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for being here. Tatara and I are excited to my brother calls it, he says, let's rap and be relevant. So I think the term rap is dating him, and the fact that I'm repeating it is dating me a bit, but it still fits. So let's rap and be relevant this morning. We're gonna talk about Unpacking the Invisible Knapsack by Peggy McIntosh. And Tatara and I had a great conversation about the article, and we're looking forward to talking to you all about this article. So, Tatara, are you ready?
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining in with us. Yes, I'm ready, Tracy.
All right. So, I guess, I don't know, one of the things we talked about, Tatara, is that, you know, the phrase white privilege is it is a lightning rod, right? And there's nothing, I don't know, there are many things that can implode a conversation quicker than to lob white privilege out into the air. But I love the title of this article. And I also love that it's an old article. And the reason that I love that is because I think that people have a feeling that this is new and this is just some new buzzword that's floating around. And it's not. This article was written back in the 80s, late 70s, something like that. I don't remember, but it's old, okay?
Yes.
It's not written in the 2000s, let's put it that way. And so I think that there's just a lot of misunderstanding around the word, and it does, to Robin DiAngelo's point, cause some fragility. And so, but we're practicing having courageous conversations. So that's what we want to have this morning, and let's talk about it. And y'all know my agreements. I'm not gonna, there's no screen up or whatever, but speak your truth. Balance showing up as an expert and a learner, okay? And we want to make sure that we hear from all voices this morning. So Tratara and I will certainly be not calling you by name, but calling people into the conversation and making sure that, you know, we're asking for a variety of inputs. So what did you think of this article, Tratara?
Oh, I thought that it was very powerful, and that you mentioned that it is an older article. However, it is still very much relevant to today's society and, you know, the mentality of people and how we think of white privilege, or whether we think of it at all. So I thought it was very eye-opening. I had a few aha moments in there as well. For example, when she mentioned the male aspect of it, and just flowing into that with saying, you know, some people are oblivious to the fact that, you know, males maybe get paid more, or maybe are just referred to more and dominant over women, and just how they utilize their privilege as a male. And then how she correlated that to people discovering their white privilege, and what that means and what that is. I think that was one of the aha moments I had. I never correlated that, you know, and some people might not correlate it with different things, or be able to identify what white privilege is until you associate it to an example that is relevant to them, or that they're familiar with.
Yeah, no, that's really good. And, you know, one of the things she says is that she was taught to see racism only in individual acts of meanness, not in systems, these invisible systems conferring dominance on the group. So that was really, I think that that's really, really powerful. But so I'd like to hear from those of us in the conversation here in the room to have the conversation with us. What were some aha moments for you from this article? Any? We're going to take a minute to get going this morning. So I think one of the aha moments for me, and I read this article several years ago, was really the first thing she said. I can, if I wish, arrange to be in the company of people of my race most of the time.
Yes.
And I don't think that white people often think about that. You take it for granted that you can just be with people without thinking about it. It's not like you wake up in the morning and say, I'm going to go spend my day with white people today. It's just that everywhere you go, there you are. You see yourself reflected everywhere. You can be, if you choose, in the company of others just like you. Whereas for me, I spend most of my time outside of that comfort level. I spend most of my time in the around white people, not Black people, because they're very, because I'm not in spaces other than when I'm with my family, when I go to my church or some other select places. But in general, on a day-to-day basis, I'm frequently the only one or one of a handful. And I see some other folks color nodding their head. So you understand what I'm saying. And I'd love to hear either another person of color's perspective on that, or from someone else in the room. Have you ever stopped to think about that? The what that means for just your comfort level every day.
Yeah, good morning.
Morning.
So yeah, my name is Allison, and thank you guys for hosting. And I have read the article. I probably first read it in the 90s, and then I feel like I've read it consistently, right, each decade after that, just to see, if I feel the same way, to see if the same things are relevant. And that is why, even as much as in workshops or other places, that we would want to look at more, newer literature. This literature in this article is still very relevant. But even the comment that you mentioned about, whether or not certain people can arrange to be in spaces that look very much so like them, certainly I think we see it in academia sometimes when we talk about why students of color may or may not persist relative to the faculty or administrators, predominantly faculty that you have in a classroom. I think is extremely relevant when you have people, whether or not it's in a dining, situation or in a student group, when people say, well, why do all of the Black students have to sit together? Well, you don't realize that, sometimes in staff meetings, the white people sit together, but it's so many white people that you don't notice that they all sit together. You notice the things that are very unfamiliar with you. And the other thing that I really love about that article is when she talks about how, in many ways, we are just such good students at that training. We don't realize that whether or not it's a commercial or social media or media, and I'm make more references to like this Harvard implicit association test, when sometimes it's very comforting for people to say, oh, I'm not biased. If you were Black, brown, purple, blue, orange, I would still love you. Well, the reality is, no, if I was purple or if I was green, if I looked like the Grinch, you wouldn't still love me, because even during these times of COVID, if I was sneezing, coughing, looked like I had a fever or a runny nose, you think I have COVID. So how could you not see me being purple or green? What you're really saying is, I'm not going to allow that to be a way for me to limit your access or deny you benefits. But the power is, we are programmed in many ways. And if we don't think about how we're being programmed and how much of what we have learned, even as children, we have to unlearn later, is probably the most profound thing that I have seen. And then lastly, because I know other people want to talk, is sometimes when people don't get the male privilege part or the white privilege part, I talk about it in terms of rape culture. And if we talk about it in terms of rape culture, things that might be very, like that men don't have to think about, right, most of the times in rape culture. And then also make an analysis when we talk about heterosexism or what it means to be a same-sex relationship, and whether or not some people feel comfortable reporting and others don't. I think sometimes when you can correlate it to other areas, then maybe a person can get it.
Thank you for that, Allison. I appreciate that very much. And you're right. Sometimes I'm exhausted with the analogies, because I keep having to, it's sort of like, I want people to get it. And so I'm grabbing for analogies, and the male privilege is one, getting women to see the connection with how women are treated is a great one. The same-sex relationship, those types are all sometimes the analogies that you really have to really grasp for to try to get people to get a little bit of insight. So anybody else, what do you think, and do you have a reaction, Harlan?
Yes, I've been aware of this for many years, and I've been on the privilege walk several times, which has its own downside. And I'm so aware of the separation and the need for white people to get past the shame and survivor's guilt, and to instead be accountable for our situation. And the other thing is that the Baha'i faith people have influenced me. I'm a Lutheran, about the oneness of humanity and the recognition that my brothers and sisters are all other people. Most people don't get that. And when I realize that, I'm able to allow myself to connect with the pain on some level, even though I'm not experiencing the physical effects of it. On some level, all of my brothers and sisters who are experiencing the lack of privilege.
Thank you so much for that. Someone else.
I will be brave and say the part that really shattered me and made me cry was number 11. I can arrange to protect my children most of the time from people who might not like them. As a mom, knowing that that is the reality for other women, there's no way I cannot support this cause. We need to stop, because you're not a mom for 4 hours or 8 hours. It is a lifetime job, and it is such a blessing. And to know that there are women who are struggling with that is unacceptable. We cannot let this continue. And I don't know what right privilege or any other way to bring this up, but we need to stop this. That cannot be the reality of other women and other mothers. That is unacceptable.
Thank you for that, Lourdes. That's really powerful. I have 2 sons. My oldest will be 31 on the 18th of next month, and my youngest is 27. And so, given all that is happening with Black men and Black people in general, and particularly Black men and police and whatnot, it is terrifying. It really is. That's a trauma that really, it takes a mother of color to understand that trauma daily that we live with. Thank you for that, Lourdes. Tratara?
Absolutely, Tracy. I feel the same way. Thank you for sharing that. I have 2 children as well. And, just my overall deepest fear is to not be able to help my child because of lack of privilege in the time of need. And whether that is from physical abuse, mental abuse, or just mistreatment in any way, it hurts you to even think about it, because as a body of people that we are more susceptible, to have these things happen to us. And so it's not like, oh no, that won't hit close to home. It's hit close to home so many times, that you begin to form an anxiety about it. And some people normalize that anxiety, within themselves, because it's just something that we have to live with every day.
Yeah, thanks. Oh,
For
yes,
sure.
ma'am.
Yes, Pam.
So, Lourdes, thank you for sharing that. I think as moms, that really can connect us here with some of this. Tracy, the first time you told the story about your son during one of the trainings, and you said, all I said to him is, I'm an attorney, just come home alive. I want to sob. I've never had to tell my son that, but it hit home so hard. And so as moms, as mothers, I think we can be drawn together to support each other, because we all can relate about how important it is, how much we love our children. And the thought of just making sure that my son comes home alive if he's stopped by the police is something I would have never had to consider.
Thank you for that, Pam. It's one of those, it's one of the issues that I've had when I talk with my white friends about, the women's rallies and women's movement. And listen, I'm all for, I'm a woman, right? I'm all down and all in for reproductive rights and and pay equity and all of the things that women care for. But what I've said to some of my white female friends is, what's missing from that movement for me is I don't hear you all saying Black Lives Matter. Because what connects us, to Pam's point, is we're mothers, we have sons and daughters and nieces and nephews, and I don't know, sometimes I wonder, it's just, I'll be transparent, it's a private thought I have that I've really never articulated outside of my Black family and friends. I wonder, do white people do they understand that I love my kid? We love our kids as much as you love yours? Do you understand that we think our kids the sun rises and sets in them just like you think yours? That our kids are just as valuable, our sons are just as valuable. And so that is that privilege that white women, white men as parents have to let your kids roam the world without fear. Everybody worries about their kids' safety and whatnot, but without fear that this is the day they die because they got pulled over by the police, is just a trauma that we live with. And it's real trauma, and there's nothing we can do about it, and it's just daily trauma. So I think, I want to give other people, because there's a whole list here. Were there any other aha moments or any of her other list of things that that resonated with people, or that were aha moments for you?
Yes, for me, I'm sorry, this is Erica Hall.
Hi, Eric.
Where she said, I was taught to see racism only in individual acts of meanness, not in invisible systems conferring dominance on my group. That was a deep statement, because it's like she said, she was taught to see it in individual acts, I guess not as systematic racism or institutional racism. Whereas for me, I left my job during the whole Black Lives Matter. I worked in a law firm, and I, as usual, the only Black person at the senior paralegal level. I'm not an attorney, but I have masters. I've been a legal project manager. I've been in quite a bit of legal departments, and being the only person of color, my physical safety, my mental safety, I suffered PTSD, which I call post-traumatic, slave disorder. And it was the elephant in the room. Nobody ever reached out to me. The partners, the managing partners, the whole firm. This is a 3-city firm in Florida. Never reached out to me one time to say, hey, I know it's rough. You're going through a lot. Do you need to take some time off? How are you feeling? I had to write a letter to HR to tell them I'm not okay. And coming here every day is placing me in a position where I don't feel safe. Like, I'm mentally breaking down, and they still didn't pay attention. So I had to have a moment of clarity, and I had an epiphany where I had to step away from my paying job without anything else, just praying that, God, please, I'll die, literally, if I continue to stay here. So stepped out of that. So reading that from her gave me that epiphany of the institution itself. And then it directly correlates to 25. If my day, week, or year is going badly, I need not ask of each negative episode or situations whether it has racial overtones. So for Black people, right, that's our spidey sense. That's our hypersensitivity to where when we go through things, that's the first thing we ask ourselves, and we step back and take a moment to process. Am I overreacting due to my sensitivity around racial overtones? Do I act? Do I react? As Black people, there's a lot of mental notes that we have to check in our mind before we even respond, because we could wind up dead if we don't make the right decision. So for me, it stirred up a lot of things as a Black woman working in a white male-dominated industry. And Traci, you as an attorney, you know better than anybody how sometimes we feel physically ill in the room with these people because of how we're perceived. So thank you for letting me share.
Thank you, Erica, for that.
Thank you, Erica.
So why does Peggy refer to these lists of privileges as invisible? Because just the idea, the title of it blew me away the first time I saw it, because, you know, I promise you, for Black people, white privilege is not invisible. So why do you think she named this?
I don't know if this is right, Tracy, but I think kind of going back to what you said before, the first part that shocked me about the article as 1989 copyright. So this knowledge has been invisible. I'm 51. This knowledge has been invisible to me until this conversation. And I kind of look at that and go, it again goes along with, I keep saying this past year or 14 months of going, why do I feel so duped? Why do I feel like I was robbed of so much education? What could I have done had I known then what I know now? And so I think for me, it's like, that goes to that invisible part, is that it's been invisible to many of us because that's the way the system is set up.
Yeah, it's normal. Just like we don't think about breathing air. You don't wake up and think, you know, oh, the air's here today. Yeah. You know, I'm breathing air today. It's normal. Like we don't have to stop and think. It just happens. So that's part of that. Remember the cycle of socialization, right? How we're bombarded with messages, and from birth, we are programmed to how things work. Research says that my 3-year-old grandson already is beginning to understand that white is better. And so, you know, I'm trying to be, when you know better, you do better. You know, I didn't, when my soon to be 31-year-old was 3, I didn't have this level of consciousness. So I didn't know to deprogram him. But, you know, I'm already telling my son and my grandson's mother, like, you know, you have to be really intentional about ensuring that he is immersed in Black culture and that he sees Black people doing great things, and in, you know, and the breadth of our culture as well, and isn't just inundated. You have to be intentional about it, because of course he's inundated every day with white culture, and just making sure that he doesn't grow up, that either one of my grandsons, the 8-year-old or the 3-year-old, grow up thinking that they're less than. Who else? Why do you think that it's called an invisible knapsack? Harlan?
The language I like to use is, let's see, am I on?
Yes, I can hear you.
The language I like to use is racial conditioning, which is a little more specific. And the racial conditioning we've been subjected to for 400 years creates a kind of negative hallucination, where you're hallucinating, it's not there. And so for white people, it's about being taught not to see it.
Yeah, thank you for that. Jeffrey, was you gonna say something?
Yeah, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Appreciate all the discussion. And I didn't read the article, but, you know, item 13, speaking in public. One of the things that I've learned, I'm a former diversity manager, and one of the things I've learned about dealing with the white male, European American male, is that it's all about relationships. And what I've learned in my deep thinking, in my faith, is sometimes you have to speak directly to the elephant in the room. You know, and sometimes that's a challenge because they don't understand us. They don't value us. But when you put a business proposition in the equation, it brings about a whole different dynamic. And but it is critical that we continue to speak our truth, no matter how challenging or difficult it is. Yeah. And sometimes that's a challenge for them. It's not a challenge for me. It's a challenge for them. Mm-hmm. And the truth is powerful, and it hurts.
Yeah, it does hurt. I think. Thank you for saying that. Thanks for that honesty. It hurts. It does hurt.
I appreciate you and flowers are doing, because, you know, it's just interesting hearing some of the comments that are coming from our European friends in this audience. I don't call white people anymore. I call them Europeans because they come from different countries. It's like we come from different continents, but the difference is they may know a little bit more about their heritage. We don't know what continent or what tribe we came from, but we know it's a rich culture. And I'm proud of that.
Yes, me too. Thank you for that, Jeff.
Absolutely, me as well.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you so much for that, for sharing that, and being transparent about that. Definitely, we share some of the same feelings. Absolutely. Beverly, I see that you have had your hand up. Do you want to share?
Yeah, thank you. Unfortunately, I did not read the article, but I just wanted to talk about the space of normalcy and abnormalcy of white privilege and racism in our country. And what I want to say is that I also have been, you know, predominantly in white spaces, and you know, we as African Americans, when we find ourselves in white spaces, we always look for each other in those spaces. So I'm always looking to see if there's any other African American, and we pretty much you know, kind of, you know, say, hey, I'm with you. Yeah. So if anything, and that's something that we do subconsciously. I think it's even instinctively that we do it. So if I see, like, I'm in a classroom and I see another Black woman in a classroom, me and her kind of like, okay, you know, even though I don't know her name and she don't know my name, we recognize each other that, okay, I got you, you got me. And it's just instinctively that we do this because we are the minority, and we are in spaces, particularly in academia, and when we are in our professional careers, we often have to acknowledge each other, or sometimes we will see each other in like hallways or whatever with in white spaces, and we'll pass each other, and we may not nod or say hi to all the white people that pass us by, but when we see each other, we say hello and we nod just to acknowledge each other's humanity. And that has been consistent ever since I can remember. You know, just acknowledging that we are here, and we're you know, we're in this together. But also I want to speak of the normalization of racism and systematic racism. And with that, I realized it became normal. It was normalized, but I also knew that it was abnormal in making it normalized. I worked in child welfare for almost 30 years of my adult life. And during that time, 90% or 95% of my clients or my cases were African-American children or African-American parents who were trying to get their children back. And also I want to say that working with families that's caught up in the Department of Children and Family Services, most of the cases that I dealt with, you know, as far as the criminal piece, 90 to 95% of those cases were African American, and they were in our criminal justice system. So that is systematic racism. So that's how systematic racism looks. Systematic racism looks like being more harsher and having harsher penalties towards Black people, or in situations where it's hard for them to survive in the communities that they're in because they don't have the resources. So they end up in situations where they have to have intervention from state agencies or things like that. That is what systematic racism looks like to me. And that is not normal.
Oh, hold that thought for just 1 second, because I want people to react to that. I think that's an important point about how to see systematic racism. And, you know, I had this conversation with a colleague a few years ago. Was that 2 years ago? I can't think of the poor little boy's name up in McHenry, who had been tortured. And like, the reality is in the child welfare system, as in the criminal justice system, Black people are over surveillanced. So while white people, like, these things happen in white communities and white homes as well, it's just that they're not under the surveillance that Black people are under. So to have us be, you know, whatever we are, 12% of the population, but, you know, 90% of the child welfare cases and 90% of criminal cases or whatever, Black and brown folks, it is a matter of over surveillancing. But the thought is that it makes it look like Black people are worse parents and white people are, oh, you know, the epitome of law-abiding, great parenting, all of those things. And it's a matter of who's being surveillanced. I want to talk about, get to, Tratara and I talked about this.
Yes.
Like your privileges. So I can say, white people are often raised to not see or talk about that, right? That's what they're invisible, like it's normalization, it's normalized. We've already talked about that this morning. But frequently deny it on class. Like I was, you know, white people will say, I'm not privileged. I was not born with a silver spoon in my mouth. I was born poor and I worked hard to get where I am. And so they relate that to class. How does that hinder then conversation? Yeah, that's what Tratara and I were talking about, is how, well, not how does it hinder, let me just, it hinders conversation.
It hinders the conversation. Definitely, it doesn't give you a basis to speak upon. You know, it kind of disregards all the hard work, you know, that the next person has done, you know, because we all know that even if this person has done a great deal of hard work, which we won't take from, you know, just like we spoke about, it then matters at the end of the process when the white privilege is utilized, whether consciously, subconsciously, unaware, you know, oblivious to get that thing that you want, or to walk through a door that was already open for you, you know, and you didn't do anything to get that door open.
Mm-hmm. So what privileges do you all have? I mean, we all have them, right? I recognize that I'm privileged in a class way, by being middle class. I'm privileged in, you know, an educational sense and in a class sense. So one of the things that I think we have to start really being intentional about is identifying all the ways that we are privileged, so that we bring them to our consciousness. It's not that I'm getting ready to go, you know, here, take the money, here's my, wherever my degree is, in a box someplace, take my degree back and burn it. I rescind all rights and privileges of being an attorney. No, I'm not going to, nor do I have to, nor do you have to give up privilege. But being conscious of it helps you to show up in a different way. So I mean, if you don't want to speak out loud, that's fine, put it in the chat, but what are all the ways that you're privileged?
So coming from a white impoverished background, those were the awareness and the consciousness is what I had not reached at a young age, or, you know, I'm just beginning to reach now at the age that I'm at, because of conversations like this. You know, reading through each one of those things, I guess I'm privileged to the fact that I have 5 children, 3 of which are white and 2 of which are biracial. And so I look through this list and I can answer this list differently for my different children. When I go shopping with my white daughter, she's never come to me and said, Mom, the store manager is following me around. But when I've gone shopping with my biracial daughter, she's come to me and said, Mom, this clerk is following me around. And as soon as she hooked up with me, the clerk took off. So I recognize my privilege in that, but then I also recognize from her end, or becoming conscious from her end what it's like to be in her skin. I am not fully conscious, and that's going to be a lifelong travel or journey for me. But these conversations, these courageous conversations, help to understand that, yeah, I was raised and what I felt a very open, loving, caring, accepting family who, we didn't, in terms of race, we did not, and we embraced everybody. We did not have any type of racial rhetoric in our home whatsoever. And we had friends of different racial makeups in our home. And this was back, I was raised in the 60s, so a while ago. And so I felt like I was raised in a pretty open, loving home. But, reading things like this, I was also, these things weren't brought to the forefront or to the awareness.
So this is a perfect, thank you for sharing that, Barb, because this is such a powerful example of, do you see how this is not a good, bad binary?
Yeah.
It doesn't have anything to do with whether you're a good person or a bad person. Barb just said she was raised in a loving, close family that was open and never used, racist language. And she wasn't, I'm inferring some things from what you said, but just that, she wasn't taught to see me as less than, or to see my sons as less than. And yet, do you hear her saying that these privileges have been invisible to her, and she can tell the difference? She has this dynamic in her home where she can see how it plays out with her white children and her biracial children. And it has nothing to do with whether her parents or how she was raised was good or bad. Okay, that's really powerful, Barb. Thanks for sharing that. Someone else, your privileges that you need to consciously acknowledge and own.
If there isn't anyone else, it would probably bring us to our next question. Have people ever used or intentionally used their privilege to get what they want?
I can speak to the last one. And I don't know for sure, but I have an inkling, right? I was able to buy my house from the owner, and I don't think I would have been approved by a bank because I had started my own business less than 2 years before. And so banks usually need 2 years of tax returns before they would consider a loan. And I had good credit. So, and I don't know, I was able to buy a house from the owner. And I think back and I was like, wow, is that a privilege? I don't know. My one neighbor is Hawaiian, my other neighbor is Puerto Rican. My Puerto Rican neighbor told me about the house that the person had passed away and the nephew was selling. And he knew I loved his house. He was like, in terms of neighborhood, it felt like I could walk around at 10 or 11 at night and be okay, which I'd never lived in a place like that before. And was super excited. It was scary to have the conversation. It's a big conversation to have. But I'd always, shared living situations. I grew up in a family of 6. In the poorest county in New York State. And so had always lived with lots of people. And so I'd always done that in my adult life, it's so saved. So I had enough for down payment, but it was totally up to the owner. Totally up to the owner to say yes or no. And So I always wonder, I'm like, would he have sold me the house if I didn't look like I looked? Or I don't know, spoken like I spoke. I don't know. I just don't know.
Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
Anybody else about, and the next question, Tratara's question about how you've used your privilege to get something that you wanted.
This is Erica. I just wanted to comment on what she just said about the house. An article came out, I think it was last week. I don't know if anyone saw it, where the research has shown that Black people, we receive appraisals lower than white people when our homes are appraised. So she was on to something there, that the research over a long period of time has shown that our houses are underappraised. So therefore we lose equity in our homes. And that systematic racism that's built into that mortgage, processing, banking, anything related to us getting those mortgages is rooted in systematic institutional racism. And that's the perfect example of privilege.
Well, and I was thinking the owner took a risk on me. 15-year mortgage, he had to take a risk to say, will she pay me every month, right? So he's taking a risk. It's his choice, and
Harlan?
Sure.
When Black and white people decide to team up and work together, we can do a whole lot to cut through a lot of prejudice and discrimination, because just by being a little clever about how you do things and who approaches somebody first, often things can happen, and it can be a lot of fun to team up together and take on this thing called institutional racism.
It can be fun. I love the accomplices and allies in my life. Gina, you've had your hand up.
Hi, everybody. I'm Gina. In terms of this privilege, the question, I've been thinking like more and more about my cisgender privilege and how it matters in terms of so many ways. Even there's always like the forefront conversation is like the bathroom conversation. Like I don't have that kind of anxiety like every time I go into public spaces, or and I also have, like, in terms of privilege in this conversation, I'm Asian American, which is a certain thing, like especially in recent days, but I have like I'm a light-skinned Asian American, so I have light-skinned privilege. And I think in terms of that privilege, to me, I have access definitely in certain ways, but I think to what I think Harlan, it looks like what you're saying is fighting institutional racism. I have access to be able to fight from the inside out. So that's how I use my privilege to, and because I am educated and because I work at an institution, like, I've chosen to use my access in that way. Like, so for me, privilege and access is closely aligned. And so it's the question of like, where do we all have privilege in certain ways? But then, like, to me, the close follow-up is like, how do you use that privilege then? Like, once you do have this knowledge and understanding, it's like, okay, now very close follow-up is like, okay, now what? In the Asian American community, I'm also a Korean adoptee. So I've been granted access into the Korean community in different ways that I'm very aware of, that there's assumptions made when I enter into Asian spaces about my upbringing. So I have like a weird kind of like, I feel like I sneak my way into a certain extent to the Asian American community. So I was raised very Irish Catholic. So like what privilege means from a racialized in terms for me, like, are definitely questions of access. They're questions of power from an institutional perspective, but they're questions of community for me in a personal way too. So there's just different ways to categorize this idea of privilege as I move through the world and in life.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for saying that, Gina. That is real. That's real. It's that access. I know that my privilege, as there literally have been times that I've gone into spaces where I have predominantly white spaces, I've been completely ignored in the space. completely ignored until someone says, oh, Traci's an attorney. Bam, everybody instantly is my friend. People come up and want to talk to me. I all of a sudden am accepted. And that is part of well, that's a lot of the title of my book, Exceptional Negro. I've been exceptionalized, right? So now I've been okay. I'm okay. When I look at you, Traci, I don't see color. You're okay. Because you've got this title behind you, you've got this education behind you, you've got this class status that I can relate to. I wouldn't relate to, other people, but you are okay, exceptional Negro. So yeah, that access that you get. Did someone else have their, yes, Melanie.
Melanie.
So as everyone's been talking, I've been sitting here thinking about privileges that I've had and have helped me get to where I am. And then you asked the question, like anytime when I may have intentionally used the privilege, and I can't think of anything. And as I look back, I can't I can't look at a point in my life where something good happened or there was a good outcome. I could say that was because of my privilege. But I think that as I was going through all those stages of my life, I never really thought about it. And I think that's one of the biggest privileges that I've had as a white person, is that I never had to think about it. The doors were open, whatever, and I look at all these incidents that have happened over the past few years to Black people that would not have happened to me. And that's that's just kind of mind-blowing to me. Like, I never had to think about it. I can go into Starbucks and go to the bathroom and not have to worry about someone harassing me. When I get pulled over by a cop, I don't have to worry about it. All these incidents and situations, I think that's the biggest privilege that I've had. It's just I've never even had to think about it or be concerned about it.
Yeah.
Wow. Thank you so much. Thank you. It makes me think about the word invisible, and the question that you asked, Traci, is why do some people, why is it invisible to them? So what she just said kind of made me, think about that.
Yeah, air, we take it for granted. If someone said, air is in short quantity where I live,
like what?
What?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh?
How so? Not for me. Right.
Or some of you may get, I'm sorry, give me a moment, with people of color, the millennial sons, that generation, houseway. Houseway. Like, really? Houseway. Sorry about that moment.
It's okay.
Sometimes I just love the cultural moments and just the, so.
Jody,
sorry.
You had your hand raised.
Hey there. So I've been doing anti-racism work for a while, and I think the point that I've reached, even doing it for a while, I still have a lot of insecurity about how to show up in this moment, right? And I'm in a lot of spaces where now that I'm exposing myself at a certain level, I'm seeing it more, right? And I think that's the goal. We want to see it more so we can interrupt it more, right? And so that's the space where I find myself in, and being braver and still being safe. And I think this is a thing that as white people start to come into awareness around their privilege, we really need to challenge ourselves to push past feeling safe, because society sort of helps us feel safe in this bubble all the time. So for example, I'm in spaces where I'm mostly volunteering now. I'm a graduate student. I'm on volunteer committees as part of early childhood education committees. And so that's sort of my sphere of doing equity work. And recently, we have a forum, Asian Interest Forum, that's put together a statement condemning violence. And the board of the association has refused to sign on to it. And as a white person, I'm like, oh, I'm signing on, absolutely. Like, that's a no-brainer. That's the easy step. And then what do I do when the board doesn't sign on? As a volunteer in this massive organization, as a new person, as a younger person to the group, what is my responsibility? And so, and we have, you know, I'm on the Equity and Diversity Committee, which is chaired by a white woman. And the people of color in that space, a couple of them, particularly 2 Asian women that were part of crafting the document, said, like, this is what's happened at the board level. She brings it to the Equity Committee for support. And the white leadership is saying, oh, be patient, be patient. My job as the white person also in that space is to say, no, we don't be patient. And I think that I had to cross that line into like a more unsafe space, right? It's still a volunteer position for me. It feels more dangerous. And what I had to recognize for myself is that it will always be more dangerous for people of color to say this stuff, always. To have to like tell the white people with power in the room, like, why can't you just condemn the hate and the violence that's happening against us? Like at a bare minimum. So that's like, as I try to like struggle with like my specific role in this movement, I have to reground, and like whatever energy I have has to be in condemning violence and building the new. Like, we're not gonna do this, we're gonna do this instead, but it has to be, I can't be trusted as a white person to know what's best for Black people. You know what I mean? Like, and we have to be really honest about that as white advocates for racial justice. And so I do a lot of my work within organizations that help me hold that accountability, and in volunteer spaces. Like, notice if a person of color in the room is saying this thing makes me feel unsafe, it is much more dangerous for them to do that. We have to recognize that courage as white people and say, shit, we really need to honor that. We really need to take a step back and look at ourselves hard.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Powerful. I saw hand clap, some hand clapping going on.
Yeah.
So
can I add to something Jody said that was, I thought, huge and deep, where she said, like, you couldn't be trusted as a white person to know what's best for a Black person, right? You can't be trusted to know what's best for any other person, period, right? And it's making me realize something that, I don't know. So I had started a platform for young people to express themselves, reshape the narrative of their community while being connected to resources and role models. And I did that through a bilingual magazine 15 years ago. And what I have found, Jody, that relates particularly to what you just said, is being able to, I guess maybe I didn't realize I was opening as many doors. I was just doing what I thought I should be doing and following my passion, which was elevating youth voice and closing equity and opportunity gaps. But the more I could pass the mic, the more I could open the door, invite people in, welcome, and pass the mic. Because I guess because the relationship had been built weekly over years with the young people, they felt more courageous to stand up in the space when the mic was passed, is probably a point number one. And the point number two is that because of I'd had more life experience, I could open more doors, I had the education, all those privileges and blessings, right? I could invite people in, and they're coming in and they're partnering and more doors are opening. And so I think passing that mic is so important, but in the right, not the right moment, but in a space that feels comfortable, that feels like people are there for the right reasons and they're listening. And so then those doors are open, connections are made, kind of fellowship over food has always worked to get conversations going across the different lines of people who've come into the space and people who are in the space. But elevating voices, giving a platform, bridging, being a bridge builder. But instead of speaking for someone, passing the mic has been powerful.
Yeah, thank you for that. And it is, and I wish we had another hour, because like it's the second hour.
Yes.
What I'd want to talk about is that passing the mic, literally and figuratively.
Yes.
How do you use your privilege and pass the mic?
Yes.
It's like passing trust almost, you know, it's like if someone trusts me and I trust this person, why wouldn't you then also trust this person, right? And creating that space for it to happen in an almost organic way, and then those relationships can keep going.
Yeah, absolutely. And then so part of the privilege I have is stepping away from paying positions or board roles or something in organizations where I don't see, you don't even have the word equity. And, you know, like if this is just a plaque on the wall, but everybody in the organization is white, the power is white, you probably got some Hispanic people cleaning your office or something like that. Yeah, no, miss me with that. Cause you're not gonna tokenize me, because I recognize my privilege. So yeah, you want to look like I'm the, you know, stick Traci, Black lawyer, she's exceptional, you know, that type of thing. No, 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 no. You have to already be doing evidence of doing some work or willing to do some work. I have to see that first. But at any rate, so that's a way of, you know, like, hey, white people, use your privilege to pass the mic. That means pass the mic figuratively means step back, cede power, cede voice,
Absolutely.
cede some control. So
Traci, thank you for that. I'm sorry, thank you for that. I just wanted to quickly add it makes me think about your TED Talk when they came in and they were doing a study, or they were doing the filming, and the white lady referred them to you.
Yeah.
You know, so it makes me think of that, you know, passing the mic figuratively as well.
Yeah, I mean, HBO came into the community I was living in and said, we want to talk about policing in the Black community, and then called a white woman. I was like,
right, right.
So anyway,
Okay.
Thank you. I know we're at 10 o'clock. Wow. This passed so fast. So I'll turn it back over. Thanks, Tratar, for
Thank you.
partnering with me.
No problem. Thank you, Traci, for having me as well.
Nothing about us without us. Yeah, that's powerful. Nothing about us without us. All right, Billy or Pam.
Yeah, so thank you both. Fantastic. Let's continue the conversation. We're together again next month. Maybe we talk about passing the mic as part of that conversation. You know, we can put that schedule together, but we want everyone to continue to speak with each other, work through this together, grow our practices, and get better at this work each and every day through NICNE. I don't know that you all know who we are, but the Center for Nonprofit Excellence at NIU. We're working with the Rockford community to build a culture of belonging in Rockford. So we are hopeful that we will have broad participation in that work. And you just opened my eyes to, okay, we need to include banking. How do we include banking in this conversation? You know, how do we include the child welfare system? This is not it's a heavy lift. But we welcome and would love to have everyone participate. It's not me inviting you. This is our initiative and how we can work together in our community. So next month, Billy, what date do we have for next month?
June 18th.
June 18th. We hope to see you all June 18th, 9 o'clock for our continued conversation, our continued courageous conversations. Again, Jatara, Traci, thank you. And thank you all for being with us.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Have a great weekend.
Thank you. You too.